You know that moment when you open your banking app and instead of that immediate stomach drop, you feel nothing but calm. No mental gymnastics about whether buying groceries wipes out your gas money. No quiet panic at the checkout line. No split-second calculation about whether you can afford to fill the tank all the way or just put in $20 and hope for the best. Most people have never experienced that feeling. And the reason isn't that they don't work hard enough. It's not that they're bad with money. It's that nobody ever told them about the specific number where everything shifts. My name is Sam, and I've spent years obsessing over the psychology of wealth. Not the magazine version of wealth where everyone's smiling on a yacht. The real version. Why do some people with average incomes end up financially free while others making twice as much stay broke their entire lives? What's the actual mechanism that separates people who build wealth from people who just earn money and watch it disappear? The answer isn't a strategy. It isn't a stock tip or a side hustle or a budgeting app. It's a number, and that number is $17,000. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right but somehow still living on the edge, if you've gotten raises that seem to vanish before you could feel them, if you've watched your bank account reset to near zero every single month like some cruel financial Groundhog Day, stay with me. Because what I'm about to show you isn't motivational fluff. It's the actual math and psychology behind why $17,000 is the threshold that changes the entire game. Let me start with a story that's probably uncomfortably familiar. It's a Tuesday afternoon. Nothing dramatic has happened. You're just sitting at your desk at work, and your phone buzzes with a text from your landlord. The water heater in your unit needs replacing. Your share of the cost is $800. Not $8,000. Not a life-altering number. Just $800, and your stomach drops. Not because $800 is some impossible amount, but because right now, today, with what's sitting in your account, $800 is a genuine crisis. It means the credit card. It means the minimum payment next month. It means the interest that quietly accumulates while you're trying to get back to zero. It means one more month where saving anything feels impossible because you're still digging out from the last unexpected thing. That feeling, that specific dread of a completely ordinary expense, is what living below $17,000 in savings actually feels like. It's not dramatic. It's not a bankruptcy story. It's just this constant low-level anxiety humming in the background of everything you do. Every swipe of your card. Every bill that arrives. Every time a friend suggests a trip or a dinner out and you have to do the quiet mental math while pretending you're checking your calendar. This is what I mean when I say most people are operating in survival mode. And survival mode is exhausting in ways that go far beyond money. Here's what survival mode actually does to your brain. Research from Princeton found that financial stress consumes cognitive bandwidth the same way a demanding task does. When you're worried about money, you have measurably less mental capacity available for everything else. Decision-making, problem-solving, long-term thinking, all of it gets crowded out by the constant background hum of financial anxiety. They found the cognitive impact was equivalent to losing about 13 IQ points. That's not a small number. That's the difference between your sharpest self and a significantly diminished version of you making every decision in your life. And the cruel irony is that survival mode makes it harder to escape survival mode. When your brain is burning resources on financial stress, you're less likely to notice the opportunity, less equipped to negotiate the raise, less capable of making the strategic long-term choices that would actually change your situation. The trap sustains itself. Now here's where $17,000 comes in. And I want you to understand, this isn't an arbitrary number I picked because it sounds reasonable. Vanguard, one of the largest investment companies in the world, studied the relationship between savings and financial well-being across thousands of households. What they found was striking. A $2,000 emergency buffer produced a 21% increase in financial well-being scores, not a 21% increase in wealth. A 21% shift in how people experience their financial lives, their stress levels, their confidence, their sense of control. Push that buffer to 3 to 6 months of living expenses, which for a significant portion of American households lands right around $17,000, and you get another 13% boost on top of that. But more importantly, you cross a threshold where the survival mode switch in your brain finally flips off. Not because your problems disappear, Not because $17,000 makes you immune to bad months or unexpected expenses, but because for the first time, an unexpected expense doesn't automatically become a crisis. It becomes an inconvenience. And the distance between those two things is the distance between running in place and actually moving forward. Let me show you what I mean in real terms. Same water heater situation, same 800 bill, same Tuesday afternoon text from your landlord. But now you have $17,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account. You read the text. You feel mildly annoyed. You transfer $800. Done. You go back to whatever you were doing. That's it. That's the whole story. No credit card. No interest. No month of digging out. No anxiety spiral. Just a Tuesday where an annoying thing happened and you handled it and moved on. Now multiply that experience across every unexpected expense in a year. The car repair, the medical copay that was higher than expected, the laptop that finally died, the flight home for a family thing you couldn't skip. Every single one of those events, which used to be potential crises, becomes just a thing that happened. And when your brain stops bracing for the next crisis, something remarkable opens up. You start noticing things you were too stressed to see before. Opportunities, patterns, options you technically always had but couldn't access because your mental bandwidth was fully committed to survival. This is what wealthy people mean when they say money makes money. It's not a cosmic reward for having money. It's that having a financial cushion literally gives you the cognitive space to think in ways that generate more wealth. Now let's talk about the math, because this is where it gets genuinely exciting. Say you're saving $1,000 a month and earning an 8% annual return on your investments. Getting to your first $17,000 takes roughly 16 months. That's a year and 4 months of real discipline, of saying no to things you wanted, of watching that number grow slowly enough that some months it feels completely pointless. And I want to be honest with you about those 16 months because most financial content glosses over how genuinely hard they are. There will be a month where you have $9,000 saved and something happens and you have to pull $2,000 out and you're back to $7,000 and the whole thing feels like a punishment. There will be a Saturday night where everyone is going out and you're doing the math on whether you can afford it and you feel like you're the only person in the world who lives like this. There will be a moment where you wonder if any of this is actually worth it. It is. Here's why. Your second $17,000 doesn't take another 16 months. It takes about 14 months. Same $1,000 contribution. Same 8% return. 2 full months faster. Not because you changed anything you're doing, but because that first $17,000 is now working alongside you, generating its own returns, pulling its own weight. Your third $17,000 is faster still, and somewhere around your 4th or 5th milestone, you start to feel something shift. The contributions you're making start to feel less like the engine and more like a supplement to an engine that's already running. Your money has momentum now, real momentum that you can feel in the monthly statements. By the time your investment portfolio reaches $400,000, something almost absurd happens. Your portfolio generates another $17,000 in roughly 4 months on its own. The milestone that took 16 months of sacrifice the first time now happens in 1 season without you doing anything different. You just wake up one day and the number has moved. That's not magic. That's compound interest finally operating at a scale where you can actually feel it working. And here's what I want you to really sit with. The investment strategy that produces this result isn't exclusive. You don't need connections or special access or a finance degree. The same index funds that built the first $17,000 build the $400,000. The same principles apply at every level. The only thing that changes is the scale. And scale, given enough time, becomes almost unfair in your favor. But let me come back to something I said earlier, because I think it's the most important and most overlooked part of this entire conversation. The financial transformation that happens at $17,000 is real. But it's the psychological transformation that actually changes your life. Think about what reaching $17,000 from zero actually requires. Unless you received a windfall, you had to consistently spend less than you earned for over a year. You had to watch your friends buy things you didn't buy. You had to sit with the discomfort of delayed gratification month after month, while the results felt invisible. You had to become a different person, not dramatically different, not unrecognizable, but different in a specific, measurable way. You became someone who can choose the long game over the short game when it matters. Someone who can tolerate temporary discomfort for future gain. Someone who controls their money instead of being controlled by it. That identity shift doesn't stay contained to your finances. It bleeds into everything. Before $17,000, you negotiated your salary from desperation. You accepted what they offered because you needed the job to start immediately. You didn't push back because the worst-case scenario, not getting the job, felt catastrophic. After $17,000, you negotiate from a completely different position. You can afford to wait 2 more weeks for the right offer. You can push back on a lowball number because walking away won't destroy your life. You can be selective in ways that desperate people simply cannot. And here's what most people miss. You often don't even need to use the leverage. Just having it changes your energy in the room. The version of you that knows they can walk away and survive carries themselves differently. They make eye contact differently. They pause before answering differently. And hiring managers and negotiating counterparts can feel that difference even when they can't articulate what it is. I've seen this happen with people I know personally. Same person, same skills, same resume. The version of them without savings got lowballed and accepted it. The version with $17,000 in the bank got a counter, pushed back, and walked out with $12,000 more annually. Nothing changed except the cushion. That extra $12,000 a year invested over a decade becomes over $170,000, all from having $17,000 in savings that they never even touched. That is the multiplier effect nobody talks about. Now let me talk about careers more broadly, because this is where I see the $17,000 threshold change people's entire trajectories. Living paycheck to paycheck makes you a captive employee. Your manager knows it. The company knows it. And whether they're conscious of it or not, it factors into how they treat you and what they offer you. You're not going anywhere. You can't afford to. So why prioritize keeping you happy? I'm not saying every employer is deliberately predatory. Most aren't, but the incentive structure is real. Employees with financial cushion are statistically more likely to leave bad situations. So companies compete harder to keep them. When you have $17,000 saved, you have what I call genuine walking away money. Not rage quit money, not burn everything down money. Just the quiet, powerful knowledge that if your workplace becomes genuinely toxic, you have time to find something better without destroying your life in the process. That changes everything about how you show up. You take on the challenging project because you're not terrified of failing. You speak up in the meeting because getting on the wrong side of your manager isn't an existential threat. You ask for the promotion because the worst they can say is not yet, and you can handle not yet. The confidence isn't performed, it's structural. It comes from the foundation you built, not from talking yourself into feeling brave. And career momentum compounds just like financial momentum. The person who negotiates well gets paid more. The person who takes calculated risks gets better opportunities. The person who isn't paralyzed by financial fear makes better decisions that lead to better outcomes, that lead to more resources that reduce fear further. The loop runs in both directions. Below $17,000, it runs against you. Above it, it starts running for you. Now I have to talk about the mistake that derails this entire process, because I've watched it happen more times than I can count. Someone grinds for 16 months. They hit $17,000. They feel the shift. They feel the confidence. They feel for the first time in maybe years like they're actually getting somewhere. And then they spend it. New car because they've been so disciplined and they deserve something nice. Vacation because they haven't taken one in 2 years and they've earned it. Down payment on a house they can technically afford but practically can't because it wipes out every dollar of cushion they've built. And just like that, they're back to zero. Back to survival mode. Back to the checkout line math and the stomach drop when the landlord texts. I understand the impulse. I genuinely do. 16 months of sacrifice is real. The discipline required to get there is real. The desire to reward yourself is completely human and completely understandable. But here's what I need you to understand about that $17,000. It is not a reward. It is not a destination. It is the engine. It is the thing that makes everything else possible. Spending it isn't enjoying the fruits of your discipline. It's dismantling the machine before it's had a chance to run. Think of it this way. Imagine you spent 16 months building a small business from scratch. You sacrificed weekends. You said no to things. You ground it out. And then, on the day it finally became profitable, you sold all the equipment and took a vacation. That's what spending your first $17,000 is. You built the machine, let it run. Here's a reframe that helped me and that I've shared with a lot of people I know who are wrestling with this exact temptation. That $17,000 isn't money you saved. That $17,000 is the first version of an employee who works for you around the clock, never calls in sick, never asks for a raise, and gets more productive every single year. Spending it isn't a treat. It's firing your best employee the week they finally hit their stride. Let me bring this to something most people spend money on without ever really questioning it. Cars. The average American household spends somewhere between $600 and $800 every month on vehicle costs when you add up the payment, insurance, fuel, and maintenance. Over a 40-year driving life, that's somewhere between $288,000 and $384,000. And that's before you factor in what that money could have become if it had been invested instead. A new car loses roughly 20% of its value the moment it leaves the lot, not after a year. The moment you drive it off the dealership, you haven't made a purchase, you've made a controlled destruction of wealth. Now, I'm not here to tell you that you need to drive a beater with no air conditioning to be financially responsible. Cars are practical necessities for most people. But the question worth asking, especially before $17,000, is what you're actually buying. Because a lot of the time, you're not buying transportation. You're buying the feeling of success, the appearance of having arrived, the social signal that says you're doing well. And those are expensive feelings when you're financing them at 8% interest. Once $17,000 is in your account and you've experienced the actual feeling of financial security, something interesting happens to those impulses. The car that felt like a statement starts feeling like a liability. The upgrade that felt necessary starts feeling optional. Not because you've become a different person morally, but because you've experienced real security, and it turns out real security feels better than the performance of it. A $30,000 car isn't $30,000. At 8% compounded over 20 years, it's closer to $140,000. That's the actual price. Most people never do that math. And the car companies are very happy for that to remain the case. I've had this conversation with people at every financial stage, from genuinely struggling to genuinely wealthy. And the pattern is consistent. The people who built real wealth didn't do it by finding secret strategies or getting lucky breaks. They did it by crossing $17,000 and refusing to go back. They let the foundation hold, added to it consistently, and let time and compound interest do the rest. The people who stayed stuck almost always shared a common pattern too. They got close to the threshold, felt the pull of finally spending, and reset over and over. The cycle of discipline and sabotage. Not because they were weak or foolish, but because nobody had ever explained to them that the threshold itself was the prize, not what was on the other side of spending it. You're not going to get rich overnight from $17,000. That's not the promise, and I'm not going to pretend it is. What you're going to get is the first real foundation, the first version of financial ground under your feet that doesn't shift every time something unexpected happens. The first experience of your money working for you, instead of the other way around. And from that foundation, if you stay patient and keep adding to it, the trajectory changes, not gradually, not linearly. It bends. The same math that made the first $17,000 feel impossible makes the next $17,000 easier, and the one after that easier still, until one day you realize the machine is running mostly on its own, and your only job is to not get in its way. That's what $17,000 actually is. Not a number, not a savings goal. A gate. The first one, and everything on the other side of it, is a different game with different rules that work in your favor for once. Build the foundation. Guard it like it matters, because it does. If this reframed how you think about that first savings milestone, hit subscribe. Every week I break down the financial mechanics that actually move the needle and the psychological traps that keep smart people stuck. Drop a comment below. Where are you right now on the journey to $17,000? I read every single one, and I want to know where you're starting from. I'll see